Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Own Your Awkward. I am super excited to have a local celebrity joining us today. He is the Tacoma guy. He knows everything about not just Tacoma, but Washington. Chris Staudinger. Chris, how are you today?
I'm phenomenal. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on board for this today.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. And thank you so much for everything that you do around town and around just the state. It's so informative. I grew up my entire, I've lived in Tacoma my entire life, and I continue to learn things from watching all of your videos.
Well, yeah, you may have oversold me right now, but I do what I can to share some Washington Pacific Northwest knowledge.
Sure. Well, and Chris is also humble in case you didn't pick up on that yet. Well, we appreciate it. So
yeah, of course.
So Chris, what do you see as the most positive thing you have that you see out in the world right now?
Oh man. And that's as soon as I knew this question was coming, I was like, wow, how do you answer that this day? But honestly, for me, it is people's curiosity. I think when I look around, there are a lot of people that are really engaged in this process of like just figuring something new out. And a lot of that process involves you discarding things that you used to think were true and then picking up new information. And I just can't overvalue that. I think I see that as such an essential trait in the world. And it makes me hopeful because I think we get better and better as individuals, but also collectively when we can just be like, oh, shoot, I'm engaged in this process of learning something new. And to do that, I sometimes have to just chuck stuff that I used to think was true.
Yeah, I really love that perspective of it coming down to the curiosity, because if we're going to solve any issues or learn a new talent, like it doesn't matter how small we're trying to be as far as just learning a new craft or huge, like trying to solve a world problem, it has to come from a place of asking questions and being curious and trying to learn what the issues are and where the other side might be coming from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is gorgeous. I love that.
Just hungry for it.
Right. Just soak up that knowledge.
Absolutely.
Well, that is amazing. Well, it definitely shows, it reflects in the work that you do, because you're always digging. It seems like you're always digging for that next piece of the story.
I mean, obviously it's something that I'm super passionate about because I'm just intensely curious about everything. And like, it's been so cool to see that I'm not alone in that. Right.
Right.
And that there are just people that are not only just excited to learn, but like proud. They'll learn something and they'll be like, oh man, I feel better about today.
Right. Yeah. It's like every time you learn something, you get like a new, button on your sash, like the scouts do, or it's like, yeah, I got my this lesson learned, or whatever it is.
Yes. Right.
Just carry those around the rest of your life.
And you see that, I think, reflected so acutely in things like trivia nights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like never has a bar been more popular, as you know, right, than when there's a trivia night. And like, there's just something about that competitive demonstration of little things that you've achieved. That's
right. Yeah.
I think people dismiss, but
every time I attend trivia, I become aware of two things. One is how much I actually know and how much I really don't know.
Right.
It's like this confidence boost and this, kill your confidence all in one shot.
100%. Yeah. As a person who knows things professionally, I feel like I really shouldn't have a job at all because there's just so much and it changes, right?
Right. Well, and there's that spark of, you have that one little trivia fact, whether it's on a street or in a conversation. And how many times do you see people, 5 people in a row whip out their phones to Google the rest of the story? And we can look at that really negative, like, sure, look at this group of people, they're all on their phones at the dinner table. But if that's sparking a conversation because they're looking up more information to bring it together, that really is the beauty of that curiosity.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I don't think like we don't have to get into the pros and cons of the internet today, but I do think
Sure.
having this access to further knowledge is phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like anything, you use it in the right way and it can be a brilliant thing. So,
100%. Yeah.
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 Well, the world is here to listen to you today and find out what your awkward is that you've had to own in order to get to this awesome place you're at right now in life. So, what's that awkward thing you've had to own?
Okay, so I had to think pretty hard about this because awkwardness is not a sensation that I feel really much at all.
Hmm.
But going down that path, I realized my thing is I love to be the center of attention.
All
Uh,
right.
I do. I love to be in the spotlight. And I think there's such a stigma against that, right?
Sure.
Where like anytime someone really enjoys being in the middle of it,
Hmm.
there's this like, oh, malignant narcissist, performative, false kind of thing that goes along with it. Whereas like clearly nobody would enjoy that.
Right.
So there's some ulterior motive to them being like
Yeah.
this.
You
And
clearly can't be a good person and want attention at the same time. Those just do not go together.
right, there's just that like puritanical, like you should be so humble and eschew attention at all times that if you crave it, clearly
Right.
you've sold your soul.
But the irony of that is you look at how many billions of dollars are spent by us on the entertainment industry watching people in the spotlight, and yet the as soon as someone that we know wants to be in the spotlight and enjoys it, it's like, oh no, that's not cool.
Yeah, you've sold out, haven't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the awkward thing for me, right? Is like trying to, this has been a lifelong struggle of like trying to own up to my very sincere desire to just be in the spotlight and recognized for that, but reassuring people that that's not insincere. You
Correct.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying here? And it can be tough at times, certainly in my past, where like just by trying to do the most honest and authentic thing to my life, to
Hmm.
be frequently accused of being so insincere.
Right. Well, I'm curious about that. So do you have a point where you noticed that that was like a point of contention? Was there a point where you saw it right away or where it just developed? And you're like, oh, that's the thing.
Yeah, so like there have been so many key moments in my life where I've had to put this whole thing together. But I remember one day where my dad told me that I was being insincere every time I spoke to him because it seemed so performative.
Mm.
And he was like, every time you just put on this like mask and you become somebody else. And I remember being like, stabbed through the heart in that moment because I was like, but that's not true.
Sure. Yeah.
But how do you argue that with someone
Hmm.
where you're like, no, no, I'm trying to be my most authentic self. It's
Right.
just
This is
different.
actually me.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that was something that I like again and again. And there was always this moment, right, where I recognized that it was something that was important to me,
Hmm.
but I didn't know how to manifest it in like a healthy, productive way.
Okay.
And so like my wife loves to tell the story where like one day I was like, we should just move to LA. I should just go to LA and just act or whatever, just do it, and then I'll know what's missing.
Hmm.
Because there was this like level of recognition that was missing from my life that I didn't know how to address early on. And it was super awkward because I didn't actually want to just uproot our lives and
Right.
go down to Los Angeles and like do whatever. But there was that image where I was like, well, that's the thing to do. If it's what you want, if you want recognition,
that's the course that people take. So that must be the way to go.
Yeah, right. And then this thing that has changed my life. I don't want to turn this into just about the Enneagram. But are you familiar with the Enneagram?
No.
Oh man,
I mean,
let me change your life.
I know I've heard this, but I'm not recalling it quick enough.
I'm like the prophet of the Enneagram these days. So it's essentially this, like, I hate the phrase personality test because that's falls short of what it is, but it's a system where you just answer questions about what's important to you. And then at the end, there's 9 different numbers, and it'll be like, okay, here's a number that you might identify with. These are things that are probably important to you based on your answers, and things that will deeply, like, really cause fear or anxiety in your life. And then it's like, here's your vocabulary toolbox to help you understand this about yourself. Also, heads up, not everybody feels this way. And it changed my life.
Wow.
Because I'm an Enneagram 3. And these are people that really are fulfilled in just achieving recognition for things that they do, for being in the center, for being outstanding at something.
Okay. Interesting.
A lot of people don't feel that way.
Right.
And so in that moment, it was like, oh, this is you. And like, it doesn't have to be the same thing. And so then I started to think, well, how could I live up to that potential? How can I live that life where I'm happy, but not make it weird for everyone else? Right.
Right.
And that's how I became a tour guide in Tacoma.
That's awesome.
Because it provides me that opportunity, right? Where I get these moments to go out and like just talk to a group of people about something I'm really passionate about and that they're interested in. And then it doesn't have to be, it's like the accepted thing. People are like, well, yeah, of course. We paid to go on this tour. That's what we wanted from this moment.
Right. We wanted this person doing all the talking as
Exactly.
a center of attention.
And then it just changed everything for me, because now I get to live that authentic moment, but I don't have to feel that awkwardness of being like I'm sucking the attention out of the room or away from someone else, because that was never the goal.
Right.
You know, it's not important to me to be more prominent than anyone else. I just really am at peace when I'm receiving recognition for doing this thing that I love. So you should take the Enneagram.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that, because I thought I had taken every type of analytical tool. There's so many out there, but I've done the DISC assessment. I've done the Gallup Strengths Finder. I've done the 16 personalities, and so I'm gonna have to add this. And there's value to each one, because they all show you a different slice, right? They're coming from a different angle. You know, one might be how you interact with people. One might be focused more on your strengths and how you can use those in your career or personal life. So
absolutely,
they all tie together.
Absolutely, it just gives you a more cohesive way to understand yourself, right?
Right. Now that I know what I'll be doing this afternoon.
Well, you'll have to let me know. I'm so deeply fascinated by it, because I think like it allows you. When you invited me to be on the show, it just hit me like a truck, where I was like, for sure this has to be the thing that I talk about, because like it's transformed my life, and I think it's helped me interact with everyone around me. So for example, I'm not gonna put my wife on the spot, but her Enneagram, a 6, really thrives on this ability to predict danger before it comes.
Okay.
To like think through every worst case scenario and then feel prepared for it by running them through in their head, which is not something that I identify with at all.
Yeah, that sounds stressful to me. As you were describing it, I was getting stressed trying to think about what could be coming down the road.
Yeah, right. And like, and so that's not something I ever got. And so it would be very easy for someone like me who thrives in this moment of like jump in first, get into the middle of it, improvise your way through it is so daunting to her. And so like, instead of being like, you are anxious all the time, you should work on that. Just be like, oh, I recognize what it is that motivates you. And I can get behind that. Like, I understand it now, and vice versa. Right.
Right.
The same way that I wouldn't want anyone to be like, you're such a narcissistic piece of garbage for liking attention, you bastard.
Right.
I think when it's just like, no, you can be motivated by things and it's not weird.
Mhm.
It's transformative, which
Well,
seemed very in line with what you do.
right. Well, yeah, because once we understand where someone's coming from, we can not only stop putting those negative labels on it, but also we can find the value in what their strengths are that come out of that. It's like, oh, this is the person I want to be around because they're going to see something bad coming and have a plan while I have my head in the clouds not paying attention, or while I'm, doing whatever.
100%. And like that man. So before I was a tour guide here in Tacoma, my wife and I were full-time travel journalists.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a power duo, my friend, because she is like nirvana level satisfaction when she could just sit down, like put an itinerary together, think through every like flight, arrange hotels, get everything together, and then like worry about if that what could happen, and then come up with contingency plans for it. Right. And so we would travel on these like trips to write stories or whatever, and she would plan the whole thing, and she was so satisfied. And then we would get there and we'd have to interact with people, and she hated it.
Right. You're like,
And
but
then
you
she'd
were so excited while we planned this.
And then she would tap me in, and that was my sweet zone. Because
Nice.
I'd be like, 100%, I would love to talk to this random stranger
Right.
about graffiti in roads.
Yeah, who doesn't?
And then that would give her the space to kind of fade to the background and not have to like feign interest in this whole thing. And so, yeah, once you know your thing, instead of trying to cut it out of you, owning it just becomes such a like boost to life, I think.
I just picture her basically writing a choose your own adventure book for your itinerary, where it's like, okay, if this happens, flip to page 15 and pick up your itinerary there.
If you only knew how right you are. She's like a real life spy novel, right?
Wow.
Like there have been times where whatever travel's been delayed or whatever, and she's like, all right, we know where the phone booth is. This is the currency we need for it. These are our emergency numbers. She's just like,
open up envelope B.
Yeah, I assume at all times she has like a shiv in her shoe, and like
right.
she's prepared, and I adore that about her.
But that is the thing. You have to not only know yourself and know what your skills and strengths are and things that bring you satisfaction, but know what the opposite is and know who's going to complement that so that you can bring that team together.
Exactly. And so like for me, that was a big part of it, is not just recognizing what brings me joy, but seeing the moments that can really erode my life. And so living in that zone where I was just trying, I was like, okay, well, if it's bad or whatever to be this way, I'll just let everyone else be up front, and I'll try and stay in the background as much as possible. And that achieved nothing.
Yeah.
Like I always remember so much from like elementary school. I don't know if you remember these incidents, but they clearly seared themselves into my psyche forever. Where it'd be like you're in class or whatever, and the teacher needs a volunteer or someone to help with something. And I was like, boom, hand, pick me. I'm ready for the mission. And teachers always had to do this thing where they're like, no, thank you, Chris. We've already seen from you. We need to encourage leadership in other students right now. So, John in the back, I know this is like,
and John's
being
like
a nail gun through your foot, but please come up and do that.
Right.
And I was like, I get it. I get it. But also, if someone's really into it,
right,
I don't see anything wrong in fanning that flame.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a good perception, because a lot of times in schools, but then it carries over into corporate life. We teach people they need to learn to be good at everything, or at least a certain level of proficiency in everything. And we don't all often look at what that does on the flip side, where we're discouraging them to excel in the things that they really love and like. Because John in the back of the room probably has a whole nother set of stuff that he's excited to do and isn't getting a chance to go do.
Yeah, they're damping down that skill set to be like, you need to consistently explore this other thing.
Yeah.
100%.
And people do it not always, from a bad place. They're not necessarily trying to devise this plan to keep you oppressed. It's just what we've been kind of bred to believe that we need to do. And until you break that mold and say, oh, you know what? I can excel and have a great life just going as far as I can with this attention I can get in my life, or
right,
whatever it is.
And I think that's what's so key. And what I love about what you do, right, is to see this thing that makes you feel awkward, that's disruptive to the group norm, but then to embrace it and be like, well, what is the good in that?
Yeah.
And in my own journey, it was, like I said, it's not that I want to suck the air out of the room or be the only person, but just to recognize it, be like, oh, just because I feel this way doesn't mean that it's wrong. And there are good ways to manifest it.
Definitely.
And so in doing my tour guide gig, I can reach that level of joy in my life so that it doesn't have to go anywhere else. I don't have to be the only one who talks in a group or whatever.
Yeah, you can find it and fill that need.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to take you back to something you touched on a little bit ago. You mentioned this, conversations with your father where he's saying, Chris, you're not being authentic. You're putting on this mask. And a lot of times when we have those conversations, we make the choice to change who we are. And, you have a choice in that moment. Well, do I adjust how I approach this? Or, you ended up getting to a place where you're taking this test, and that may have been years apart. But was there a time where you tried to fit in to change how you approach things, or were you just, no, I'm not going to do that?
No, absolutely. I tried that for a long time, where I was definitely in that mindset that if you seek any attention whatsoever, that's a bad thing. So I just tried to be as background, non-visible as possible, and just let everyone else do the talking.
Yeah, and you almost sound depressed as you're saying that.
Of course, it's soul crushing. Yeah, I found no satisfaction in it, and obviously I was very bad at it. And so yeah, I think the downside to it is not just the obvious that really was not satisfying at all, but like I think I would manifest my desire to stand out in other ways. Right. And so it just wasn't great. I don't recommend it.
So I guess I'm curious too, like, then once you kind of decided that it was okay, was that an overnight change, or was it something that took a while to kind of see the returns from?
No, it was very gradual. And I think understanding scale was really important to me too, right? Where I don't know what it is, if it's everybody or just me, but I felt like if I wasn't on the biggest scale of recognition possible, then it didn't really matter. So that was where this whole insane idea of like, just go to LA, do the thing. Where I was like, if I'm not internationally famous, will I even care? Will it even matter? But that wasn't accurate. And so doing what I do now, where I get to talk to people really regionally, and help them make a connection with this place that we love and like know more about it. and on the various degrees, not just in-person tours, but like on social media and everything. That's enough for me. I'm really in a good spot with that.
Good. And
But
did
yeah.
you find that, how did people react when you stopped trying to be a certain way and all of a sudden this is perfectly fine for me to be this way?
Yeah, I think it was just universally great. Where everyone was like, well, yeah, of course this makes sense.
Right.
Why wouldn't you have done this earlier? Which in some cases felt like quite the betrayal, because I was like, oh, how we've changed our tunes, haven't we?
Exactly. Yeah, I find oftentimes the people close to us, like the supportive people closest to us, you always have people in your circle that don't try anything, don't be different. But our supportive groups, a lot of times they see the greatness in us or the thing that we could be really good at that we don't always, we may have an inkling of it, but we don't know how to piece it together. And so sometimes either we get a nudge from them or we start to do it and then they make one of those comments where you're like, oh, and it's like, well, if it was this obvious the whole time, how come nobody told me?
Why didn't you just say something? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I get that.
That's fair. So tell us about what you're doing in Tacoma. We've hit on it a little bit, but you are a tour guide. You're Mr. Trivia Facts of the Northwest. Not, and that's putting it lightly.
Oh no, that might be giving me too much credit. Yeah, so I am a tour guide here, primarily in Tacoma, all through the South Sound. I own a company here called Pretty Gritty Tours. And what we do is mostly me, with a few other guides, take people out, and we have sort of our like meat and potatoes stuff where we have ghost tours and beer tours and like city tours. But I've really leaned into, like I think everyone during the pandemic, a little something new. And so during the last 2 years, I started doing a lot more virtual tours and would just live broadcast them on Facebook and YouTube, and people were really into it. And so that has really transitioned now into a lot more of what I'm doing on like TikTok and everything, which is just giving people bite-sized nuggets of information about this place.
Yeah, it's they're great. They're informative. I tell you, there are some things that I have known, and then I see you tell the story, and I learn a little bit more. I was like, oh, that's what that's about, or things that I didn't even know were a thing. And for our listeners that are not from the Northwest, Tacoma is Grit City. That's our nickname, outside of being the City of Destiny, the official nickname. But Tacoma is just a great blue collar, grown, raised on lumber, and it's a beautiful town here in the Northwest. But the nickname is Grit City, so that's where Pretty Gritty Tours has that connection.
Absolutely. And that was something that was important to me from the start, because every place in the world that I love is gritty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as you know, I'm very deeply concerned about sincerity in all things. And so I just like that. I like when you can go to a place and there's this reputation where it's like, is this a good spot?
Uh-huh.
And they're usually the best ones.
Yeah. And Tacoma has been that place for a long time where it's kind of like, in the Northwest, people are like, Tacoma. And I'm like, I grew up here. I love it. I'm just like, if you don't love it, then great. I'd rather you're not here.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I don't want you begrudgingly living in my city.
Oh, and that's the beauty of Tacoma, is that I feel like as a city, it doesn't try to impress.
Yeah.
It's
In
like,
a good
you know
way.
what? We're very much aware of who we are, and
Mm-hmm.
you take it or leave it. But we're
Yeah,
busy today.
exactly. And that's one of the things, like, I'll tell people all the time when they're new to town, they're just like, oh, Tacoma's, it's a great vibe, blah blah blah. And I always say it's perfect. You could walk into any bar in town and strangers will talk to you and you will have a great conversation. Or you'll even, it's a small enough town that you'll end up seeing somebody that you might not know really well, but you've seen them around town, and it's enough to be like, oh hey, I've seen you at the Parkway, or I've seen you at, fill in the blank.
Exactly. It's so connected, which
Yeah.
is amazing to it. And I wish people focused on that more. I think anytime you talk to someone who's familiar with Tacoma, but hasn't experienced it really, they're always just like, oh, the Tacoma aroma.
Right.
First, like, because no other city in the world ever stinks.
Right.
Like
No other
Manhattan
city has
smells
any
good
street,
all the
apparently.
time. Seattle's just this like floral bouquet. I'm like, first of all, pump your brakes. Cities
Right.
smell bad sometimes. Get off your horse.
Right.
But it's like as if one thing ruins everything else of
Hmm.
value in a place. And I'm an adamant crusader against that mindset. And that's a big part of why I started Pretty Gritty, is that I wanted to remind people, not just people visiting, but people that live here, hey, there's a lot to love about this place. You should be proud of it.
Hmm. So with everything you're doing with Pretty Gritty, has that changed your perspective or shifted your curiosity when you travel to other places now?
I think I took that mindset that I was already traveling with and built something in Tacoma with it. I think, especially when Tani and I were full-time travel writers, we always went to places that weren't like the top 10 list
Hmm.
with the intention of being like, what is it that makes this place great? Surely there's something here that isn't getting a ton of recognition. And then let's find it. And so when we hit this transition in our lives where we wanted to have kids and we knew we were going to have to slow down the travel a lot more, it just made sense to take that framework here
Hmm.
and be like, well, damn, here's a place that has a terrible reputation, but so much to offer. Why don't we help people see that?
Right. Yeah. Why not just bring that same curiosity home and ask those same questions? Uh,
Yeah.
I love that perspective. One of your favorite videos that I recently saw was the you're at Over the Moon Cafe and the gal is saying she's stuttering on saying she's from Tacoma, and then you pop up with say it, just say Tacoma, and then you walk through just fact after fact after fact that are just cool things about Tacoma. Some I knew, some I did not know, and I was like, oh, this is a cool video. I just was telling someone who's new to town they need to go watch that video. I said,
That's
it's like watch this and memorize
that's
the
my
facts.
dream. I wish I could make one for like every town in Washington because there's just so much. I mean, hell, globally, if I had all the time in the
Sure.
world. But
Over
I just
time.
think there's so much. There's so many great things, and like you should focus on them.
Right. Now, where is the best place for people to catch you and support you online if they're not here in town?
I've tried to make it as easy as possible to find me because I feed off of it. Um,
As we established.
as we know, that's the cornerstone. So everything is Pretty Gritty Tours. I'm on Twitter, Pretty Gritty Tours, Instagram, Pretty Gritty Tours, online, prettygrittytours.com, TikTok, YouTube, pretty much any social platform except for Twitch, which I don't really understand and I don't game.
I haven't figured that one out yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, I just try and help people connect with this place. It is my great passion.
That's awesome. And we have links to those in the description here. So click on those. Please give Chris some attention because he wants to be in the spotlight.
I just
So
love it.
so get on there, start clicking on those and click the follows. And remember when you're watching the videos to hit the like, make a comment, share it with a friend, because that really helps people get more support. So
Awesome.
so Chris, what would be some advice you would leave our listeners with as far as how they could own their awkward?
Well, I mean, I don't think I've stressed this enough. Go take your Enneagram.
Definitely. And we'll drop a link also to that.
Just take the free test online. Don't pay for anything. Figure out your number and then just, yeah, recognize that this thing that you may have been judged for or made to feel uncomfortable about is a really valid thing that you drive value from
Mm-hmm.
and run with it. There will always be a way for you to be a contributing member of society, but true to yourself.
I love that. One of the things when you were mentioning that earlier, you brought up the fact that not everybody thinks the same way or feels the same way. And when you're looking at those results, you have this moment of, oh, other people don't feel this way about that. And that was kind of something that I've learned. When I'm doing speaking workshops, I remember when I was first trying to involve the audience, and I'd be like, okay, stand up and share your thing. And later I was like, oh, people didn't really get involved. I was like, oh, how did I forget that like the number one fear for people is speaking in public? I
Yes.
practice doing this all the time. I'm just like, hey, share something. Why don't you talk? And it's like, oh, that's right. I have to ease them through that situation. Uh, but it's that realization that not everybody feels the same way. Not everybody's comfortable in whatever it is you're comfortable in, or seeks the same, fulfillment.
Yeah. And it's just what a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And then to see that in someone else and be like, oh, shoot, now that I know how you derive your value, I can be a part of this journey.
You're gonna be walking up to people on the street and be like, so what's your Enneagram? Let's see what we know about each other.
As if I don't do that right this very day.
You have name tags with like I had one of the conferences that I go to. It's a no longer virtual conference, and it's just brilliant. It's kept to it's more of a summit. It's kept to 40 people. But on the last one, Sarah Elkins, who puts on this event, she is a StrengthsFinder coach from Gallup. So on our name tags, we had our top 5 strengths. So, and on our placards at the table, so you could get to know people and really have that conversation. I think that the more we do these types of things and the more people are self-aware, it'd be great to just walk up to a stranger and be like, hey, what's your, people do it with sign, what's your sign? But
yeah,
get to another level.
And that's my big thing about the Enneagram, is that it has nothing to do with when you were born or anything. It's just you answer the questions, and then it's like, here's the words that you may have been struggling with.
Yeah.
This is what you care about based on what you told us. And if you're like, no, that's not true, then you can take it again and you'll be like, oh no, these are things I actually care about.
Right. And it's a direct reflection of what you expressed. So it's nothing external put upon you. So.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. I very much appreciate it.
The pleasure was entirely mine.
Well, I enjoyed it, and everyone else, be sure that you go on. Like I said, give Chris all that attention, put the attention in the spotlight, give him some follows, some likes. I know we got millions of listeners probably watching this today, so appreciate you all being out there. And as always, own your awkward. Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.